Hi everyone, this is Rita from X6. So it's nice to see you here once again. So this is the first live stream of the month of March, but I just want to tell you that this is a pretty special month. So we're going to have a lot of great content to be shared with you, and today is no exception. So I hope you're excited for a nice live stream that we'll have today. I'll guarantee that. So before anything else, as you know, and as I mentioned before, I'm Rita, I'm part of X6, and I'm super excited to have you here today in one of our live streams. This is super exciting to have you here, either if it's live or if you're watching us after in the recording. So cool to see you here. Awesome even to see people that this is not their first live stream. It's their second, their third, or even more. They've watched more live streams, so cool to have you there. So as a reminder, and before we get deep into today's talk, we just want to remind you that X6, what we do and who we are. So X6 is an engineering company focused on providing capacity to product companies. We're not a typical project company due to several reasons. And I always say this, but that could be just a talk by itself. But we have a huge focus on community, a strong engineering culture, and a product drive. And X6, we believe that represents a great balance between projects and products. And our teams across Portugal work in building products while dealing with the broad stack. So if you want to know more about X6, our team, our open positions, our content, and more even, make sure to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Medium. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel where it's likely that you're watching this. But we think that we do some cool stuff, so make sure to follow us. But before anything else, I want to introduce you to today's speaker, Elias Nogueira, which will give a talk on how to create a modular microservices task project. And before anything else, I'll bring Elias to the stage. Elias, it's nice to see you here. Welcome.
Hey, nice to see you. Thank you.
Elias, so I'll just give you the full ownership of our stage, of our online stage, but I just want to, before doing that there will be space for questions. So Elias will be here, of course, not only to give his awesome talk, but also to answer to some of your questions. So make sure to leave them in the comment section. We'll go through them throughout the presentation, and yeah, it will be a great one. So with no further ado, Elias, the mic is yours. I'll add your screen to our stream as well, and yeah, let's give it a go. Thank you so much once again for being here. Hope you enjoy it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So hi guys. First of all, thank you for being here with me to learn a little bit about testing, and with this testing perspective with microservices, because nowadays microservices is everywhere. So it's a good thing to how we can break down our projects, or how we can structure our projects to create a better approach with less maintenance, high quality, and of course achieve all the results we want to achieve with this test perspective. Okay. You guys can ask question anytime, and I will stop in some slides and ask you, okay, you guys, do you have questions? So Rita will manage all the questions as well. We will be replying those questions during the presentation instead of the end, because I believe it's better, so it will be fresh. You guys can ask questions during as well. Okay, this presentation will be a mix of slides. Of course, I will go through the slides. I will not read all the topics from the slide, but I'll give you the context of it. And in the end, I will show the projects, because I will talk about how to create those kind of projects, and I will show you codes to the idea. This is let's say, the best part of the presentation, because we can see some examples. Those examples are really simple, but you can try to mimic those exact examples and during your day-by-day activities. So more or less, you have the same. You have the same structure. Of course, you can change it, and you can apply in your project. Okay. So I'm Elias Nogueira. I'm an engineer. What I do normally, I help people like backenders, frontenders, QA, DevOps, any kind of engineers to try to achieve high quality in their products and their projects, whatever they want. So I act in both sides as a, let's say, coach, try to teach them how we can do better tests. And of course, I put my hands on the code. I love it. And I create some tests, I create some approach, I create a lot of different things. Okay. If you want to follow me some social medias, you can put your cell phone camera through your cell phone on this QR code. You're going to see all the presentations I gave, my network links, and everything that I have. But mainly, my Twitter is my name, Liz Nogueira. So super easy. What problem we are going to solve with this breaking off different tests from microservice tests from microservice projects? We need to increase the confidence in delivery. This is the one of the main focus. We need to cover, of course, all the possible key scenarios from the user perspective, and we need to try to find all the possible failures during any modification during the development process, right? Of course, nowadays we run everything through a CI/CD process, but normally we need to deliver a software with no bugs, with no issues there. Sometimes it's impossible, but with this mentality, we can decrease a lot the amount of bugs we might intentionally deliver to the customers. And just to give a regular overview, normally we have probably your company has it, and all the companies. My company has a plenty of like thousands or dozens of microservices, and we have some microservices APIs in this drawing. And each microservice is a small feature or a group of features that we can interact, right? And those we must guarantee that we have unit and integration tests for it. This is primary thing as an engineer, as a backend engineer creating microservices. We must have tested all those interactions with my endpoints internally. After that, we must create some way to test integration between the APIs. Why? Because in this first part with the individual APIs, doing the unit integration test, I'm mocking the external dependencies, communication with other API or for third-party API. So this is not like you're going to get the confidence about your API itself, but you don't know if like your API with another API in communication to create a result still works, right? Because of that, we need to create functional tests, and sometimes, I would say most of the time, create end-to-end test scenarios focusing on API tests instead of like we normally know end-to-end tests for user interface, right? But here we are going to try to mimic the same steps through the user interface, but through the API. And of course, for that, why? Because we need to test those differences because some APIs consumes our API and we depends on other API and everything depends on everything. There's a classical image like Amazon with the APIs. There's like just a lot of drawings. You cannot understand anything. It's more or less this, but here is just to explain to you that we depends or consumes a lot of different APIs. And this must be tested as well. So how we can create projects mainly to do this, to do functional and end-to-end tests, testing these real dependencies with the consumers or the consumers or the dependers. We can create in different ways. Now, just to give like an overview, I'm not focusing on unit integration tests. I'm focused on functional and end-to-end tests. But if you guys would like to ask something regarding unit integration, you can place your question in the chat. I can reply to you. The first thing we can have normally in the backend services, we can have a lot of APIs that should interact with others or not. But in this sense, in this model one I'm calling, we can have one test project for functional end-to-end tests to cover all the API tests. What is the good part or is the not that good part of it? The good part, we can have the centralized point of code. So everything, every common methods to access database, to see the logs, to manipulate anything will be in one place, in one project, like a monorepo. And we can create tests, solve problems super fast because I have one in one project. I go there, I do a fix, I test the fix, I push the pull request, I approve and merge, and that's it. The not that good part of it is that constantly changes can make people have some side effects, have a lot of merge conflicts to solve, and sometimes it's becoming like a megazord. So if not well structured, it'll be like super hard to find the test, to find the base architecture. Any code that you need to use will be hard to find. Even though, of course, we can easily like starts to dig a little bit in the code and understand the flow, even though sometimes it's hard. I have tried this model. It's a one model, but for me, it's not the best one. What is the possible model? Let's say start from scratch. It's a good model. The model two. In the model two, we are going to have for each API one test project. Okay. Now we have a better isolation, right? Instead of only one test project split in different APIs, we have one test project per API. And we can organize all the centralization we have through the API, and we can isolate all the tests. If I have an API that do only search for my application, I test only search in that test project. If I have another API that communicates with a third-party credit card provider, I will test only that third-party credit card provider with my API, and so on. And the bad things of it, possible code duplications, because you will have some same base actions in different test projects. You need to, let's say, in your infrastructure, in your test on your project, you need to plug in the application. We need to generate logs, reports. We need to maybe change the infrastructure on the fly during your test execution. So this piece of code will be spread out different test projects. And of course, this is super easy to solve. But if you not pay attention, this will be a problem because different teams can have different approaches to achieve the same thing. This is not that bad, but sometimes for the test times matter, and one approach can take longer than another. So in the test perspective, with this automation, we need to achieve like the faster feedback as possible from the test. So it should run super fast. And what is the model 3? Model 3, we are trying to add this missing part, almost the missing part, actually, where let us explain this sense. We have an API that will search for, we have a product where we'll create a website on a platform that will sell flight tickets, okay? So let's say each feature from a website that sells flight tickets has like the basic things like search, payment, flight selection, flight change. I can cancel my booking. I can do a lot of things. Possibly everything, the search, the flight selection, the payment, the flight change, etc., will be a different API, right? And sometimes for search, let's say to try to book a flight, I need to use a search API. But also to cancel a flight later on, I also need this search API to search for the flight or to search for other flights for the customer in order to change or cancel the flight, right? In this kind of way, I'm introducing here one extra project that should be the client one. This client one will be basically all the API interactions. So in this model 3, this client project will have all the necessary logic to make any request based on the API specification, the Open API specification, of course, that will throw and return any exceptions, the transport objects, all the requests, all the customizations and validations, all basic pointings like URIs, base path, etc. But mainly I will have all the API requests based on my Open API spec. So I can do all the calls like search for a flight, for this, using this query parameter, etc. We are going to have, of course, the test project, but within this breakdown, the test project will have a dependence from the client project. And in this test project, we are going to create only the tests, and we are going to consume all the methods in the client project in order to generate or create my tests. And of course, it will gives to you a fluent way to create it. Okay. And the most important thing for the test project, of course, testing the whole logic, validation, and the flow. Yep. What is the pros and cons? The pros, I can, for any feature breaking change, any experiment, I can have a centralized point where I can change and I can see if that will break all the projects or not beforehand. And of course, if my API is being used by other teams, they can use only the client, use the methods I already have, and they can introduce those methods in their tests to create their flows. Cons, it the time will be increased a little bit because as we need to manage all the features, probably you're going to create different versions because it needs to versioning it, create a great change log file to explain everything. If you have a break change, if you don't have a break change, how are you going to do it? This will be the time consuming part. It's not that much, but like there's more from my perspective, more pros than cons. And how we can implement this kind of thing, and I will show to you how to implement the model 3, because the model 3 seems the best one for professional workspace, where you might have a lot of different microservices to interact with. But for to extend a little bit more and to in order to solve that problem we might have with code duplication for basic things like database access, log generation, reports, and everything that you could use in different projects, even test or clients. I'm creating more 2 extra projects. Now you can see for each API, I already have 2 projects, one test, one client. And now I'm introducing 2 more projects that will be a dependence from either the client or the test. One I'm calling as commons, and another calling as parent. So the client project, as I said before, will contain all the calls for the microservices, all the methods, and maybe in some way like that. I will search using like some query parameters, or I will create a request, like I will buy a flight ticket with the correct dates, without the dates, with this, with that, okay, and returning the correct like HTTP returns. The test project will contain only the tests, and I will test all the features there. The commons, in my terminology, in my way, it's connected to the client project, and I will have all the libraries that are commons among all the other clients projects, definitions of URLs, authentication, shared code, anything like this. And the test parent, the parent for the test project, I will have, of course, some libraries, testing wise. I will have different, like I'm calling here database, but not the all the data you need to generate. I can create like all the different approaches. I can have support features. I can have any common code or tests that should run across all the different test projects here. And for the example, I will explain to you to the user interface. It's super regional thing from Brazil because I'm Brazilian. And in Brazil, we have something called CPF, that is Social Security Number. And normally in Brazil, as everything, like Social Security Number is a unique number that if you have it, you can give to the banks or any kind of organization to do a lot of different things. And let's say here I need to simulate a loan, to get a loan. and we need the CPF, the social security number. So I will fill in my CPF, my social security number, and I will see if I have like a restriction, I cannot take any loan, or if I can take the loan. And this will be the first screen, the first part. This clearly it's an API, right? The second part is to fill in my data and tell how much I would borrow, or I can borrow, or I want to borrow. So this is the second part of the application. So I fill in it's a classical CRUD operation, and this also sees a different microservice. After if I don't have any restriction, I can jump into the screen and I can submit all the requested data to simulate this loan. Cool. And probably in the end will be a successful message telling, okay, we are going to analyze your request, blah, blah, blah. And I'm listing to you the possible calls I can have for this part, that I will search for the social security number and see if it has a restriction or not. And regarding this one, that is a different microservice, that is mainly a CRUD operation, okay? So let's say for the restrictions part, for this for the search part, I'm calling restriction, I can have maybe a version 1 and a version 2 of the API. And I can see the API is a restrictions, and it has the CPF as a path parameter. And I have two different versions for that. Maybe it's because the response body of it. And for the simulations one, the CRUD operation, I have the classical CRUD operations, the get for everything, the get by social security number, to post a simulation, to update, to put the simulation, and to delete the simulation, okay? And now I will go through a flow where I can try to connect this API explanation with these endpoints through some test flows, and how we can organize in different splitted projects like test and client. By the way, I explaining a lot, but let's stop here a little bit until the example and see if you guys have any questions.
So, no questions yet, Elias, but I think people must be enjoying it so much until now, and it's super clear that they don't have yet questions.
Cool.
But this is a good reminder, if you have any questions, to leave them at the comment section, and Elias will address them all. So just don't be shy, go ahead. So, yeah. So we don't. Otavio is saying that no questions yet, but they'll surely come. Thank you so much, Elias. Go ahead. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. If you have any kind of question, guys, ask. There is no no shy on it. Ask any questions. I ask a lot of questions during my work day. So yeah, even though it seems like super silly questions, I'm asking because sometimes I'm in doubt. So let's ask, right? Why not? And after explaining to you, of course, this should be an OpenAPI specification, super beautiful, but just explain to you how this example will work. It's just in a slide. Let's talk about the client implementation of it. So we have the restrictions API with two different versions, but they have the same thing. To a path parameter, I can send the social security number, and it will return to me it has a restriction or it doesn't have any restriction at all. And what I can do in the client project, I will create this request.
Elias, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind, but you were speaking about projects, and actually we have a question about that, so I thought it could be a good timing.
Cool.
So,
perfect.
Good one. First of all, Ricardo Martins, thank you so much for premiering our questions of this talk. But Ricardo asked, when you talk about projects, is it another repo or something like this, Elias? So could you give a bit of context on this?
Yeah, exactly, Ricardo. It should be a different repo. Of course, you can create a mono repo with like a multi-model project or only one repo for that. But mainly in this my explanation, it should be a different repo. So every project we have is a different repo on your GitHub, on your system. to create it. So, and I would say it's better to have a repo for each project because you can easily manage. And I will show in the end, we are going to manage it through different versions from clients, from tests, for parent, for any kind of project. So to be interconnected, but it's good to have it splitted, at least from my perspective, because you can have more control on it. Thank you for your question, by the way.
Makes sense. Thank you so much, Elise. And also, Ricardo, thank you for your question. If you have more, you know what to do. Thank you, Elise. Go ahead.
Perfect. So in this client implementation, I have the get, the search for a restriction using a social security number, and a method inside this client would be find CPF or search for social security number, right? And another one would be find by social security number and return an exception. Because let's say, from my perspective, an exception would be, I don't know, maybe if I have a restriction and only find CPF, only find social security number with 204 would be okay. I don't have any restriction, right? This is regarding the client. After more few slides, I'll explain the test connection need. And for the simulations, like the crude operations of it, I can have to get the simulations, so I can find all simulations. I have the simulations by the social security number, so I will find by the given social security number, and maybe I will have a method to try to find it, and will not return anything. Will return not found, 204, because it doesn't exist. I can create a simulation, and I can create a method that will submit successfully a simulation, or I can submit a simulation and return a processable entity because I'm sending the wrong body to request body through this post method. And I have another one that I can return a conflict because maybe it's already exists inside or my database. So okay, it already exists, so you don't need to create it. It's we can debate about conflicts to the post, but yeah, I'm just giving you an example. How I can now create this connection between the client and the test project, two different projects and two different repos. Let's say I have the client project with a call to the simulations, and I will get all the simulations. In this case, I can create a test. I should create a successful simulation. Sorry, this is a post. I can create a simulation, and one of the tests creates a successful simulation. But I can have also a different test for it. I can have another method that will send the processable entity, and I will try to post with some attribute wrong there, some extra attribute that doesn't exist in my API specification. And for conflict, I would say, okay, I'm sending it. I'm trying to force to create, but I already have it. So I can create them like already exist. I can create for one method, one or n or multiple different tests for that. And you can see it's splitted. The client will take care only about the methods that can do an action, but we are not going to assert on the client. We're going to assert in the test side, where we are going to create a test, like add test, my methods, and everything. We are going to use the clients to make the call, and after that, we can assert the results, the response body. And how we can use this integration between, not integration, but dependency between client and test. But before that, if you guys have any questions, let's just wait for a few seconds to see, and I can continue. No. Cool.
Yeah, we don't have yet questions, but I think it works when we say for people to have questions. So, guys, if you have them, you can, of course, feel free to leave them in the chat. And as Elise said before, there are no silly questions. Just throw them in the chat and we'll address them. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Elise.
Perfect. So how we can use this client and test? Mainly, as a dependency, right? So I'm a Java guy, and I'm using a lot of Maven in Java, so we can create a dependency, just adding the dependency with the version. But by the way, if you use any other different programming language with different tools as dependency management, I'm showing a TypeScript with Node, so I can do like almost the same thing with any programming language. So we are adding dependencies to have this connection between the client and test. And one thing sometimes that's good, as the client and test evolves, it's better to create to apply the semantic versioning correct in in this sense, and even to try to correlate my client, my test, and my backend project within the versions. Of course, you can create it in a README file. You can create some tags. You can create any kind of approach for it, but it should be in your consideration. Why? Let's say your application will evolve all the time, right? And you are delivering to the customer. But let's say 3 months later, there is an issue on the version 1.2.4, and you need to reproduce that. But your API already evolved to the version 203. How you can simulate that things on the version 1.2.4? So it's better to have this comparison, okay? My client for that 1.2.4 is this version, for the test is this, and for the backend is that. You have this correlation to make sure you can try to mimic, simulate that issue without any problems in your side. It should be in place because bugs will happen in the customer side, sadly, and we need to take care of it. Otherwise, we are just evolving our application, of course, depending on our context. We're just evolving our application, and we are not taking consideration that I might need to do a fix for some customer if I'm delivering software for customers with different versions.
Elise, we actually have a question. So
Cool.
I'll throw it to the stage. And Baram, thank you so much for bringing your question. And the question is, how assertion happens in the test projects?
Cool. Mainly the assertions will happen. In this right side, like the first one in the test, should create a successful simulation. I will, through the submit a simulation, I will submit a simulation, and of course, the submission will return some response body, right? And this method, submit a simulation, will return the response body, but I will not do anything on the client side. I will do on the test side. So after this call, I will get this response and I will do the assertions there, and I will show. I will show as the example to you.
Perfect.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much, Elise, as well, for your answer, and thank you, Baram, for your question. Go ahead. Thank you.
Cool. A recap. To create, like, let's say, kind of robust model, we need to test all the microservices in isolation. Of course, unit integration, we cannot debate. We must have it. But to extend our coverage and try to see that parts that we are not covering with third-party dependence, with dependence we might have with other microservices in our company, we need to create like functional tests and end-to-end tests for it. And one of the best approach, I have shown to you 3 different ones. And we can see that I'm focusing a lot on the model 3 because it has a lot of different projects, but it gives you a lot of freedom to manage everything. And in this model 3, we are breaking into client and test projects, where the client is the API or the API calls, and the tests are only the tests for that microservice and the dependent microservices. And on top of that, we have two shared projects, one for the client, another for the test, which is, in my terminology, the commons for the clients, that all the code and libraries that I need to use for the clients, and the test parent, all the code for the test and libraries as well. Cool. This is come later. Now I'm going to show to you the implementation in the projects, because of course it's good to see a lot of like drawings and everything, but it's even better when we see some code, right? So here on my IDE, It's super small. I don't like to put in the presenter mode because it's super big. I have different projects here. I have the test parent, the test commons, simulation test, simulation client, restriction test, and restriction clients to implement exactly what I was talking about before. Let's start with the test parent. The test parent maybe has no source code here. I could have to manage any dependency or any shared code I would have on the test. But I do have the libraries I'm going to use. So let's say here I'm using Java 11. I'm using JUnit, AssertJ, REST Assured, Jackson to create the to automatically mapping all the requests and response to a Java object, so it will be super easy to manage it, and the Java Faker just to create some data on the flight without create some hard-coded code or CSV JSON files. I can use this library to generate everything for me. Okay, basically in this example, I have for the test parent only the libraries I'm going to use in all the different test projects. Now the client, the test commons that should be connected to the client's project, I do have on the POM.xml here some libraries as well. I'm isolating even the REST assured one that I'm going to use to do this test. I'm using a Jackson notation in owner to generate all the properties, but I have small libraries here, some libraries to use, but I do have code. And in this case, like it's super ugly code. It's only for examples, only for like we to understand better. I have here all the basic endpoints like URI, base path, port, and version. That of course I will create a composition on it, and I will use it to hit the base path, the complete base path through my endpoint. Okay, and of course this is one of the basic things for all the client projects to make a request. Cool. And now
Very cool.
let me show
Elise, sorry to interrupt you.
question.
We have a question. Every time I interrupt you, it's because we
Awesome.
have a question.
Awesome.
Good.
Yes.
It's awesome. We have another one from Ricardo. And Ricardo says, sorry, can you talk again about the benefits of modularizing automated test projects instead of being all in one repo?
Of course. I can explain explaining the different clients and tests in 2 minutes.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
I will explain
Go
the
ahead.
client and I will explain, yeah.
Awesome.
So let's say in this restriction, I have here on my dependency, my POM.xml, I have the dependence of the test commons to create a composition of my base request, right? My base URL. And code-wise, I have here on the source a base client. Again, it should be connected to non-op API specification during the regular professional development, but here is only as explanation, okay? And what I have here, I'm getting the base URI, the base path, the port for a configuration. I will show you later where I'm getting those different configurations that should be placed on the test project. Yeah, here I'm hard coding the version and the base context for my API. And what I'm doing here, I'm creating the base call, doing a super for my REST client. My REST client, it's placed on my test commons project, so it will be shared in all the clients projects. And now I have here return, let me increase a little bit, return social security number with restriction, that I know that this specific social security number that I'm sending as a parameter will have a restriction. And you can see here, it's telling me that is a validatable response. That's something specific from the library I'm using, Brush Assured, to create a response that I can validate, and after that I can convert this in whatever the object I want. And I have another method social security number without restriction. I'm sending the social security number, and it will return nothing. It's a void because I expect that it's not found. And how I'm doing this with this library, internal library that I'm using, test library for APIs, pressure assured. I'm sending the path parameter, that is the social security number that I have here in the parameter. I'm sending, constructing this restriction, that is slash restrictions, within slash, within CPF. And it will create more or less this version 1 restrictions, and we'll add on top of restrictions the CPF I'm using, but through the code. And of course, this get path will be connected to my client. So my client has all the concatenation here for the string to compose this method call. Okay. And I can see this is a get method, the same as here, but here I'm expecting something like status code okay, and it's returning something for me through this validatable response. What happened in the test project for this restriction? My .xml, I have here the client that I'm using, and this answers partially your question, Ricardo, because you can see that I'm using a specific version. I could use 1.0.0, but I'm using 1.0.1 in my case. And why the benefit of this modularization? We can split in different responsibilities, because if we even follow the microservice concept, everything should be isolated in that microservice, as well as the test, as well as any kind of consumer you have. In this sense, I'm creating the client to interact with my API and to be able to others that dependent on it can consume as well. But instead of they started to implement their methods as they want, I'm only here create some kind of pattern, and I'm giving to them these already methods, so they don't need to create like the code inside of it. They already have everything. They just need to use the method. In the test, I have here two different things. A property file telling me what is the base URI, what is the base path, and what is the port. Why? Because of course, sometimes I'm in local development, sometimes it's deployed in some Kubernetes cluster, sometimes even on production. Who knows? And one of the things I need to easily manage all those things, the pointings. So I'm telling here that's localhost, but I can easily override or change here the properties. The second part, I have the test, super small ones, simple ones. But what I'm doing here, I'm creating the instance for the restrictions client, and instead of before each should be before all actually, right? So I can have the restrictions client on hand. And here I'm creating a test, should return a restriction. What I'm doing here, restriction client, return social security number. I'm placing here one special one, and this should have a restriction. And I'm creating this validatable response as a response, and in the response, I have a body. Of course, it's the response body. This response body should have a message attribute, and this message attribute should have this text. CPF, this has a restriction. And in the other case, social security number should return like not found exception, because there is no restriction on it. I'm just calling restriction client, search for social security number without restriction, sending one. And why I don't have an assertion here? This is the tricky part, because in this call, I already have the stats code, right? As not found. I could return the stats code and just assert it, but I know for sure that that test is wrong. It will stop anyway because of the stats code. But to create a more interesting thing, I will explain to you this the simulation part. But let me check if you have any new questions. Otherwise, I will jump to the simulation part. And of course, I will run this. To run this, let me start my. No. No questions? Okay. Okay, running. The simulations client and test. Okay, Rita is.
We do have a question. Sorry,
No problem.
Elias. Good. Ricardo, thank you so much for bringing so many questions. Awesome
Yeah.
to know that you're enjoying it. So Ricardo brought a question, which is there an easy way for us to keep tests up to date with the API documentation tools like Swagger? Maybe creating a new repo for keeping up to date tests versus features. Do you have anything on this note, Elias?
An easy way, I never saw some kind of plugin or library that can keep you just up to date with all the different perspectives. What I do, of course, based on the API specification, Swagger or the Open API specification, I'm generating the base client, and through the base client, I'm already generating all the calls. And for each call, now it's coming to this testing perspective. For each call, we need to analyze, okay, this call will return a 403, a 401, a 409. We return a lot of 400x returns. And I will create different test case for that in the test site. But I never saw something like they can do this for you, like really simple, and create a skeleton from it, like a dummy code, and you can implement the test there. But what we do to, in order to speed up the process, we do use both and some in-house code to generate all the stub things and all the calls from the API specification.
Awesome.
Thank you for your question, by the way.
Thank you also, Elias, for your answer. Go ahead. Thank you, Ricardo.
So in this simulation client, of course, in the prompt.ml, I have the, yeah, this is wrong, but it's okay. This is right, sorry. I have the dependencies for the test commons. And in the code, I have here more code than usual. And this is nice. Why? I have the client here, and my client will have all the calls for this API. So let's focus on the methods. Try to see how many methods I have for CRUD operations. I have get all the simulations that returns an array of simulation. I have create new simulation that return a header, because in this sense, I'm extracting the header and I'm see through the header if it was created, and if I have the key point, that is the social security number there. Getting a simulation for a social security number, returning a simulation. Now you can see I'm returning real objects, mapping the response body to Java objects. And I'm also doing one thing that is super good. When I have something that is not found, I'm returning the exception, because when you're creating an API, sometimes, of course, we are not throwing the normal exception that Spring or any other tool, Quarkus or any other library tool is throwing by default. We polish it a little bit. And in order to polish a little bit, I'm also creating a specific class only for the exception when it's not found, to mapping the information I should throw and I should assert. As not found exception, as conflict exception, as unprocessable entity exception. And I have like delete everything here, okay? And here inside, let's see the not found exception. I'm doing the normal things with fresh assured. I'm sending a name. I'm sending the path. I'm asserting the status code that is not found, and I'm extracting the response body as this not found exception, as the same as the get simulation. Let me show you the get simulation. I'm sending the social security number, send the path, status code is okay, and extracting the body as simulation. And in this case, I have a Java object. I'm not using any library to try to just have the attributes here. You know the tool. I don't like that tool. I don't like that dependency, by the way. But I have here like ID, name, CPF, email, amount, installments, insurance. That is a boolean. That is my response body. And when I have it with rest assured, if I have a Java object with all the same attributes, I must as my response body or request body, rest assured automatically do a magic behind the scenes connecting those attributes with my class. So it's super easy. I don't need to pass like regular strings or concatenate strings and try to do any magic. Rest assured does it through the Jackson library or JSON library or any other library that supports it. And I have a lot of methods here, right? Whoops. And I have shows to you the client, the model, and I have for the exceptions as well. Just throwing normal exceptions, all based on the simulation exception. And the simulation exception normally has a message. So probably if you guys are using Java, you guys do this, like creating exception class custom one, getting some parameters and throwing it, right? And now the test part. Close all. The test part, I have two different things here I will show to you. First, the test. Let's say this test, it should return a simulation by the social security number. So I should have it already on my database, and I will send the social security number, and it will return the full simulation. What I'm doing here, I'm getting one exist simulation. This is not tricky, but it's a good thing to do your test. So I'm isolating this test. I'm trying to find one existing simulation in the database, and I'm retrieving it to use in my test to be successful. So I will jump to that class later. So after that, I'm using the simulation clients to get simulation by social security number, getting that existing simulation and get the CPF, that's social security number, and I'm doing a soft assert here with assert J. Okay? As the same when I create, let me see the create, should create a new simulation. And during this creation, what I'm doing here, I'm using the simulation object. I have created a builder on top of that, and I'm filling the name, CPF, all the attributes to send as a request body. And after that, I'm creating the new simulation using the client. And the response will be the header, and I will assert that header has the value location, and it contains the social security number there. And the location, most of the time when we do try to follow the API specification for creation, I'm setting the header with the full path for that get methods. Okay, here I'm doing the normal thing, simulating all the interactions with the API as well, but now it's more fluent. And to answer now, I believe the completely the Ricardo's question, what is the benefit of it? I can, let me just like create some kind of test, void I can now create like I can connect different APIs. Let's say if restriction is connected with the somehow with the different one, I can use the simulation client to do something, and after that I can get this will return a list of simulations. And I can use, like, let's say if I have a different client dot do something with my simulation. I can pass the list of simulations here and do something. Probably this will return something like my object. And what I'm doing here, of course, this doesn't exist, but now I can connect the flow of some APIs easily and create some end-to-end test scenarios. Now I'm showing to you only functional tests, but you can create easily end-to-end scenarios for it. Cool. And the last thing to explain to you regarding that data factory, my test project has a data factory here, where I can create a lot of different objects using a library which is Java Faker, like generating this CPF, create a new simulation with random data inside instead of name Elias here. I'm generating random names to run and not to fixed things when I run some tests. Cool. I will show to you the last slide. That is a thank you for your questions, for being here with me to understand a little bit more about this kind of approach to breaking down our microservices tests in different test projects. The presentation will be on the chat and also through this QR code. I will post this as well on my LinkedIn, on my Twitter account, which is Elias Nogueira. And if you guys have any question, I'm still here. I will be glad to answer it.
Elias, thank you so much for such a great talk. I think I want to share with you a message that Ricardo shared with us in the chat, which is this presentation showed me how to think like a developer. After all, quality assurances are too, right? And in the games, in breaking the automated task project into small pieces. So I think this is great feedback that we got here. So
Perfect.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Elias,
Ricardo,
for making this happen. And also thank you, Ricardo, for your questions and also for keeping this talk so interactive. And also, as Elias said very well, and while you understand if you have your final questions, we just shared the links not only for the presentation but also for the project, as Elias said. So make sure that you also check those out. And of course, if you have any questions, just rephrasing what Elias said, make sure to reach out via Twitter or LinkedIn. And before we finish, we have a question from Baram, and Baram asks how the servers or downstream process run.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on your question, because I didn't get it? Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Baram, if you could just use the chat for that, it would be ideal so that we can finish our presentation on a strong note. In the meantime, while Baram is also putting together these contexts, as we were saying before, Elias is available not only on Twitter but also on LinkedIn, so you can make sure to reach out to him. So we have here the context that Baram mentioned. So you said it's the end-to-end test.
Okay. If I understood correctly, how we can do streamline this process running those tests, end-to-end tests, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I have in my context, yes, so the client should send a request to a server. Yes, for sure. Here I'm using a local host, of course, because I have it's my project. I have it as my local, and I have a property file to pointing to it. But normally you can have like this locally, but most of the time you have like an environment to run it. And in my case, my specific case, we have developed a tool to create ephemeral environments, deploying a cluster, deploying the Kubernetes infrastructure as a cluster. So every time it needs to run some tests for different versions, for new features, for everything. First, I create an environment on the fly. That me takes like 3 minutes. And after that, I'm running all the tests. like as a streamline process. I don't know if this answered your question, Rahan.
But we hope so. Make sure to let us know in the chat if you have more questions for Elias. Hope it was clear for you. Let's do a final sprint. Okay, it seems like it was clear for Varam, because Varam mentioned thank you. Of course, thank you as well for your question, Varam. Very good one. I think we're good to finish today's talk. If you agree, Elias, I just want to emphasize that it was awesome having you here. We had great questions from the audience, great content. I think this is one for the records and one for the books. So thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure not only to share the online stage with you, but also to have your content shared with us. So we hope to see you here once again in the future. So if you want to do that, you can go ahead and just make sure to let us know. And of course, to everyone watching this from home or after in the recording, it was also awesome to have you here. You can make sure not only to reach out to us as X6, but also to Elias if you'd like to know anything else about his work, his presentation, and his opinion on some of tech-related topics. So thank you so much to everyone that joined us. We'll have a special streaming next week on Tuesday on International Women's Day. So keep an eye for that. I think it will be good content as well shared there. So thank you so much for everyone. See you around. Have a good rest of your week. Bye, everyone. Ciao.